Shalom, it's my pleasure to continue with this series in which we're discussing the subject of living from the heart with all of your heart. And in fact, I want to give that as the theme for this particular section, with all of your heart. Not too long ago, I attended a violin recital that was given by my granddaughter. And I've followed her musical career with the typical interest of a proud grandparent. But on this occasion, while I was very impressed with her playing, it was the violin playing of another girl several years older that really spoke to me. And this girl was, I don't know, she couldn't have been more than about 14 years old. Her technique was, it seemed to me, flawless. The conservatory where my granddaughter studies, both granddaughters, is quite demanding. But this girl just, she didn't seem to miss a note, and her tone was amazing, which of course is not so easy to achieve on a violin. But what really captured my attention was not her technique, but it was her passion. This girl was playing with all of her heart. Her body swayed to the music and expressed what was coming through the strings. Her bow flew across the strings with energy and with intention. It was just really a great experience, and I felt myself caught up. I felt myself carried by the performance of this young woman. She took me into emotional places. She took me into mental places. I was just experiencing so much because she was playing with all of her heart. And so I want to really use this experience as kind of a jumping off point for speaking about what does it mean? What does it mean to live with all of our heart? The book of Deuteronomy alone uses this particular phrase no less than 8 times. With all of your heart, God tells Israel to serve the Lord with all of our heart, to obey Him with all of our heart, to seek Him with all of our heart, and to turn to the Lord with all of our heart. Doesn't leave much room for tepid, lukewarm religion, does it? I don't think that God is interested in a kind of either a cerebral relationship in which it's all coming through our mind, nor do I think that He is touched by or drawn to people whose approach to faith is one of kind of haphazard, well, come see, come saw, it doesn't really matter, it's not so important what I do, it's not really important whether I participate in congregational activities or house meetings, or that I pray and speak to God on a regular basis, or that I look into what He has to say to me from Scriptures. Of course, all of these are only a beginning of expressing a life with God that's lived with passion. And as we mentioned in the last section, Yeshua uses this temperature metaphor in the book of Revelation in chapter 3, and He says, I know your works, that you're neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were hot or cold. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. These are pretty rough words, but they leave no doubt about the divine recipe for something that's worth experiencing, that's worth eating, that's worth having, and that is that there needs to be a fire. There needs to be a fire in our heart toward God. He speaks in another place, interestingly, also in those introductory chapters of the book of Revelation, to the church at Ephesus, and upbraids them for losing their first love. So this is what we call the heart growing cold. In fact, I remember another place in the Gospels where Yeshua speaks of the end times leading up to His return. And He says that the love of many will grow cold. So I think that dealing with the matters of the heart, the condition of our heart, our heart relationship with God is very, very relevant as we approach the second coming of the Lord, as we move into the home stretch, if you will, of the end times, coming into times of turmoil. Where is our heart? If our heart is not beating strong for God, if there's not a furnace of love inside of us, I think we're just going to get swept away. I think that there will not be sufficient involvement with God, sufficient equipping from Him to be able to move through these times as dedicated believers. And just to go to the positive side, God wants to use us in this time. How can He use me if my heart is not beating in concert with His heart? How can He use me if my heart is lukewarm and not really so concerned about the destiny of people? This is what concerns God, and what I need and want to share that concern with Him. So what we have is an intensity, a concentration. This artistic passion of this young violinist eliminated neutrality. It said, no, I can't remain neutral. I'm not going to be able to sit on the sidelines. I have a favorite phrase: there are no spectators in the kingdom. To be a spectator means to watch. It means that I can sit in my armchair. I can judge others. I can evaluate the performance of others. It's kind of a, what should I say, uninvolved, detached approach. But God is saying, I don't want detachment. I don't want apathy. I don't want a people who are uninvolved and on the sidelines. I want you to get on the field. Yes, you're gonna get bumped and you're gonna get bruised and you might get bloodied. I love the quote from Theodore Roosevelt. I don't have it in front of me right now, but a paraphrase is, he says that the prize does not go to the one who's in the stands, who's analyzing and criticizing and reviewing what's happening on the playing field, but the prize goes to the one who's down on the field. If you think about rugby or soccer or American football or any of these games where even also basketball, particularly the way it's played now, of contact sports, or certainly not contests of military conflict. But the prize goes to the one who is bloodied, the one who is bruised, the one whose limbs have been broken, the one who has perhaps done his job imperfectly, but who dares to get on the field and to expose himself to that injury and to that suffering. So, in this regard, we really have the ultimate example of a heart passion in Yeshua. In fact, a phrase that's used to describe His suffering on the cross is the passion. Passion is a word that comes from the Greek word pathos, and pathos is deep emotion. It's a driving feeling. It's something that has the implication of a powerful, almost irresistible force, and it was the passion of God's heart through Yeshua that drove Him to be crucified, that enabled Him to subject Himself to such incredible torture and rejection and humiliation. And so if I want to understand what does it mean to live with all of my heart, I need look no further than Yeshua HaMashiach. That the love with which He loved me was a love of passion. It was not a disengaged love. It was not a disinterested, abstract love. It was a fully engaged love. It's a wonderful book written by a friend of mine, David Harwood, that speaks about the extraordinary quality of God's love. And in the heart of the book, he speaks about the misunderstanding regarding the word agape in Greek, which actually turns out in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Septuagint, which was done before Yeshua's time, the word ahava, which is the primary Hebrew word for love, and which carries this sense of passion and emotion and involvement and identification. The translation of ahava is agape into the Greek Old Testament, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, which tells us that the concept of agape, as it's frequently defined, as being a kind of a abstract, disinterested, unconditional love that's not based on the worth of the object of love, is really it's a false definition. The roots of God's love, of God's heart, are in this place of feeling strongly, of feeling so passionate, of being willing to give up life for the one who is loved. That is the message of Scripture, after all. What are the qualities of love? Well, we know from the 1 Corinthians 13 chapter in the book of in the New Covenant that love suffers long and is kind. It does not envy. It does not parade itself. Doesn't seek its own. It's not easily provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in wrong, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, because love never fails. Now, all of that description, not to take time to analyze every word, but every verb that was used in this description is an action of love, and God Himself is love. So that means that all of these phrases are descriptive of God, and I would say of God's heart. That God's heart is not puffed up, that God does not seek His own good from His heart, but seeks the good of others. This passion of Yeshua is most profoundly expressed, as we've said, in His sacrificial death. But when He was asked, what is the greatest command? He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. This quality of doing life with all of our heart is what we're speaking of, and it intrigues me. I really feel forced to explore it because I want to live the way that God designed me to live. And if we think about it, God did not design us to live apathetically, haphazardly, half-heartedly. There's another expression, half-heartedly. Am I just going through the motions in my life? Am I kind of distant? If you find yourself in that position, I really want to invite you to turn to God with all of your heart right now and just say, Lord, I'm feeling detached, disinterested, not involved, not engaged, and I recognize that this is not healthy. I want to be involved. I want to be engaged in what's happening in your heart, through my heart, so that I am affecting people around me with your love and for your good. This is the highest contribution that we can make, is to let God touch others with His heart through our heart. Clearly, with all of our heart involves being focused. It means my mind is operating in synchronization with my emotions. My body is poised or active in a unified direction. And what an attractive possibility that is, eh? To be at one with myself, to be synchronized with my own heart. It's interesting that, you know, that one of the measures of our well-being is our pulse, our heartbeat. I can put my finger on a place on my wrist, and I can feel my heartbeat. If I can't feel my heartbeat, I'm in big trouble. But I feel it beating. When they take your blood pressure, it measures not only the different segments of that, but it also gives you the rate of your heartbeat. Is your heart beating in a healthy way? And I would say that this image could be easily translated over into the spiritual realm. I want to approach life with dedication. I want to pursue life with a singularity of focus on the heart of God, and this is what is spoken of the great heroes of the Bible, that their lives were given over. The chapter on great heroes of the Bible in Hebrews chapter 12. What we see, again, we referred to David as a man after God's heart, a man who lived from his heart, a man who gave his heart to what he was doing. I once had an experience that was very focused, and where I would say relatively early in my life I experienced that with all my heart quality that I'm talking about. And it happened this way. When I was in my teenage years, I began playing drums. And in high school, I found a saxophone player who was really a marvelous person. His name was Tiny, which was a joke because he was huge. He was enormous. It was just like really big tall guy and very kind of bulky fellow who played the alto saxophone crazy good. I mean, he was just like, I would have put him into a professional jazz band, and that was our favorite music to play, was jazz. So we began to work on this one composition by a famous jazz composer and pianist named Dave Brubeck, and the song was Take 5 for those who are jazz fans. So this particular song, it's intriguing because it's in a very different time signature, and we just listened to it over and over again, and we kind of memorized the solos within the group. So we were invited to a youth group to play music, just the two of us. Tiny on sax and myself on drums, and who knows what everybody was thinking, that we could somehow pull off enough music, just the two of us, to somehow entertain or inspire these kids. But anyway, we went and we played one or two numbers, and then we came to Take 5, and we began playing it, and we were really getting into it. And what happened was, unplanned, we just lost ourselves in the song. I mean, we kept playing it, not for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but for half an hour we couldn't stop. It was moving, and with only two musicians, that's kind of unusual. It's really a bizarre thing, but it was with all of our heart. And when I was thinking about this phrase, with all your heart, interesting that both of these examples that I'm using have to do with music. I believe that there is something about music, about playing music, about giving oneself into the melody and rhythm of music, words, if it's a sung tune, that just can create a place of oneness between the musicians, and of course in music that's giving praise and worship to God, oneness with the Lord, which is why until today one of my absolutely favorite things to do in all of life is to worship God with others using musical instruments. I'll never forget that experience of passion, that experience of playing with all of our heart with Tiny. So the Lord wants us to be involved. This is His divine recipe for a beautiful life, for a worthwhile life, for a life worth living. I'm remembering also the words of Paul the Apostle, that he speaks about having been shipwrecked and beaten and all that he suffered and left for dead, and all of this reflects the commitment and the positioning of a man, of a soul, who is stopping at nothing to serve the purposes of God. That's what I want to live that way. I desire that for you, that you would stop at nothing to live the purposes of God. Now, it's tragic in a way, though I believe we can overcome it, that in the era in which we live, both the technology that's enabling me to talk to you from Israel, from a studio in Haifa, Israel, to wherever you are on the other side of the planet, that same technology also betrays us, also impedes our ability to live with all of our heart. And here's why. Because living and interacting constantly with a device like this, that we are either texting or emailing or looking at something on YouTube, we're interacting with a screen. And as miraculous and incredible and wonderful a tool as it is, it can really be our downfall in heart, because what happens is that what masquerades as real involvement is not real involvement. To simply exchange texts or put a post on Facebook or whatever the format is. Yes, if I have a relationship with somebody, we can do some business, we can progress in our relationship. I'm not saying that it's useless. I have one and I use it every day. But what I'm saying is that it can be such a hindrance, because it's a lie that by watching other people do things that I'm involved in life. That living with all your heart requires that you also live in the dimension of human relationships, putting this aside, looking at someone eye to eye, speaking of things from heart to heart, being present physically with other people, not just in a kind of a FaceTime, what should I say, reflection. It's as if a reflection of the true image, rather than being right next to the person. Of course, if you're across the world, you don't have that option, and it's a wonderful thing to be in touch with your relatives. I'm not putting it down. What I'm saying is that it really can negate this reality of living with all of your heart. And I believe that that's what we're called to do, and that we can be so bold as to ask God to help us, and to say, Father, I want to live from my heart. I want to live with all of my heart. Teach me. Teach me. What does that mean? Your word says that you will instruct me. I'm asking you to instruct me. How can I live? How can I be a person who's living with all of his heart?